One of the more significant developments in my own evolving spiritual narrative has to do with reincarnation. In my Pentecostal youth, belief in living more than one lifetime on the earth was heresy, akin to belief in the occult. The church made it quite clear that such ideas were a flirtation with the devil. The zeal of my fundamentalist years produced a number of impressions that lingered for many years after. Placing any object on top of a Bible still makes me uncomfortable enough to move the object elsewhere. There were times when I felt that reincarnation had appeal and could be worthwhile, but indoctrination against such ideas kept me from giving reincarnation serious consideration. A little more than a decade ago, like so many revisited ideas named taboo by evangelical Christianity, confronting my discomfort with reincarnation became part of my journey toward renewed spiritual faith. Eventually, I reached a tipping point after hearing stories of people who inexplicably have been able to recall otherwise unknowable facts about previous lives. I concluded that a loving God could not be so cruel as to send us into the world as totally blank slates, with just a handful of decades to figure out who you are and have to ace all of God's commandments to love wholeheartedly. That seemed a staggeringly tall expectation of flawed and imperfect creatures, especially with a cost of failure like eternal damnation and suffering. Perhaps the most compelling aspect for me of Christian teaching is the endless opportunity for redemption and rebirth. If God grants us as many chances as we might ask for in one lifetime to be born again in order to realize our most loving, caring, and compassionate selves, why then would He not let us take as much time as we need to realize our full and best potential, even if the amount of time needed were longer than the span of one human lifetime? In this edition of the Temporal Reverie, I want to explore how our spiritual growth and education are uniquely served by a journey that accumulates experience and wisdom from multiple trips through the theater of experience. Are there lessons we need to learn that can only be learned by repeated journeys through life as different human beings? The answer comes down to more than extra time to learn. The need for repeated incarnations is essential so that we can gain experience over and over to see what it's like to walk in the shoes of others. Again and again, the type of lives we return to takes us across an experiential landscape of varied encounters and perspectives that taken together serve many purposes. But none of these purposes is more important than the one essential mastery we can only achieve through many different selves and skins: the cultivation of empathy. During our lives as mortal human beings in this world, each of us develops a sense of identity. That identity is a complex bundle of perceptions that starts taking shape the instant we are born and in the process receive a non-stop bombardment of sensory stimuli. We are given a name, which becomes so closely associated with our sense of identity that we often introduce ourselves to others with language that equates ourself with our name. We say things like, "Nice to meet you, I'm David." The connection between our consciousness and our physical body is also integrated into our belief about who we are and what we are. Our body is the contact point for all the stimuli we process as experience. It is also the vehicle we use to carry out the agency of our actions, our choices, and our expressed thoughts. When we feel our emotions, those experiences always contain a physical expression ranging from tears to laughter to the fevers of embarrassment or anger. In fact, the binding between our consciousness and our bodies is so powerful that many of us conclude that our body is who and what we are. Our memories of the things that have happened to us or near us or because of us are also folded into identity, and so is all the information to which we are exposed, whether we accept or reject that information. The nature and quality of our relationships with others become facets of our identity too. This textured and detailed combination of everything we experience, everything we remember, everything we strive to do or become expands and evolves day by day in the ever-changing sense of self that stays with us for our entire lives. The psychological term used to identify this perception of identity is ego. Ego is a portion of our consciousness that resides in our conscious minds. It starts to develop the day we are born and is the product of our trip through the theater of experience. Ego is a consequence of our mortal incarnation. And yet, there is so much more to our complete identity than the contents of our ego and our conscious minds. Just outside our powers of perception, but nevertheless an unavoidable component of personal identity, is our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is where the accumulated experience, lessons, memories, and knowledge we collected across all our previous incarnations are retained. While we can't summon that information in precise detail on demand, the contents of our subconscious selves influences and informs our conscious minds as intuitions, the contents of our dreams, and echoes of experiences such as déjà vu. The subconscious mind is also where we learn to keep record of the broad brushstrokes of what it means to be a human being, brought into our lives from the contents of the collective unconscious that all human beings draw upon as they incarnate. Drives, passions, instincts, basic understanding of right and wrong, and archetypes by which we know and identify universal parts of human experience all live in the subconscious mind too. Taken together, all these things contribute to what we call identity. We draw upon all of this to evaluate, inform, and carry out the choices, the actions, and the messages we project into the theater of experience. Some of this we are able to invoke on demand from our conscious minds, while the contribution of our subconscious minds is more indirect and subtle. While these things are invaluable as we live our lives, and as dependent as we are on it all, we know we also benefit from other sources of information and from influences outside ourselves. We seek to understand others who have different beliefs and ideas than ours. We ask the advice of others, for example, in hope that what others share will either validate or fill in gaps in our experience. We exchange points of view that may prompt us to reconsider our experience when challenged. While we know that seeing things as others see them is valuable, asking others to give us that insight has its drawbacks. Even when they sincerely try, other people can't entirely avoid telling their stories colored by their own needs, wishes, and agendas of the moment. Their stories come to us through the imperfect medium of language, in which meaning can be altered both by the words others choose, as well as our interpretations of the words we hear. The very best way to truly know how differences in the experience of others might help us learn and grow is to somehow have those experiences become our own. The conditions of the human experience, however, constrain our ability to actually inhabit the life experience and therefore the point of view of other people. Unless we have been gifted with telepathy and can momentarily see through the eyes of other people, the best we can do is make use of our own gift of imagination to envision how another person's history, the conditions of their present, and their aspirations for the future might cause us to feel. While we try as best we are able to let go of our own story for a moment and imagine how we might be instead if another person's story became our own, we attempt to step out of ourselves and into someone else. This is the value of seeking to walk in another person's shoes. The capacity to know another person's experience, to see the world as they might see it, and in the process to understand why and how they came to react to the events of their lives, is empathy. As Edith Stein puts it, empathy is the experience of foreign consciousness in general. Of all the qualities of consciousness, the one that is central to the development and exercise of morality, ethics, and the cultivation of all positive connection between human beings is empathy. Empathy is the foundation of compassion. It is the seed that germinates into wisdom. It is the raw material of consciousness. Our ability to recognize, understand, and reject actions because of the harmful consequences they will inflict on others is informed and empowered by our empathy. Psychological studies of criminals, from rapists to serial killers, demonstrate that one of their common characteristics is a lack of empathy. In fact, missing or underdeveloped empathy is a defining attribute of psychological dysfunctions that result in sociopathic and psychopathic behavior. Gustav Gilbert, who was the American military chief psychologist during the Nuremberg trials of high-ranking Nazi leaders and who spent a great deal of time observing the defendants, had this to say about what he found. I told you once that I was searching for the nature of evil. I think I've come close to defining it. A lack of empathy. It's the one characteristic that connects all of the defendants. A genuine incapacity to feel with their fellow man. Evil, I think, is the absence of empathy. My own view about evil is that it arises from the unchecked pursuit of ego and selfishness as a first principle. Empathy is the check and balance that reins in ego and contains selfishness. So the ability to step out of yourself and then put yourself into someone else's shoes is not only profoundly important as you seek greater understanding of yourself, it is an indispensable element of spiritual growth. Empathy is not an easy thing to learn or practice. We often become so inured with the way our own experience defines how the world looks to us that it can be a challenge to set our expectations, assumptions, and even our prejudices aside in order to imagine how taking on those of someone else might cause us to think or feel. But in no small measure, all of the great spiritual masters became who they were because they mastered empathy. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus was not only a master of empathy, he made empathy a central theme in all his teaching and of his ministry. In giving us 2 commandments to follow, the first being to love God with all we are, we find empathy at the center of the second pair. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. In order to learn to love others as you love yourself, you have to see others as being equally deserving of love just as you are yourself. This requires more than understanding others at an intellectual level. It can only be done by feeling in other people the same worthiness of love that you find in your own heart. No matter one's religion or spiritual path, one of the themes they have in common is the need to learn and practice empathy. It can take a tremendous exercise of imagination to wear someone else's shoes. And since we cannot truly become someone else through imagination alone, even if for no other reason that we never truly know everything in another person's life that informs their experiences, the best we can hope to achieve is enough empathy to approximate what others must think or feel. In understanding the limits of our conscious minds to imagine the experience of others, we come to see how a single lifetime can limit our mastery of empathy. And in seeing the limits of growing we can achieve in a single lifetime, we begin to realize that the full mastery of empathy becomes possible by doing more than imagining other lives. We must actually experience other lives. We must actually do in reality what we seek to do within our lifetime, which is to step out of our own life and truly inhabit a different life. Reincarnation provides us with more years of living experience than we are able to have in a single human lifetime, no matter how long we manage to live. Through reincarnation, we accumulate hundreds, perhaps thousands of years of human experience. It is the classroom of consciousness that truly is timeless. But reincarnation provides much more than time to learn and grow. It provides the very literal gift of experience in life that is the experience of others. While we can and should strive to practice empathy in our lives, the best and most powerful way to master empathy takes the collected experience of many lifetimes. Not because of the time required, but because there is no substitute for actually being in someone else's shoes and to gather the experience of many lives, each of which we lived ourselves, and seeing how the different experience of those remembered lives caused us to feel. If reincarnation is the means by which we can inform our spiritual growth by cultivating empathy over multiple lifetimes of varied experiences, then perhaps that knowledge offers insight into the reason behind some of the pain, the suffering, the heartbreak of life we experience. For those like me who believe in the reality of reincarnation, there is a question to consider about the origins of the difficult and even tragic experiences we encounter. Do these things serve a purpose in our growth? Might they cause us to actually choose them as part of the plan for our upcoming life? While each of us comes across heartbreaking stories of loss, suffering, pain, or sorrow, and according to our empathy find ourselves relating to the victims of such experiences, there is no more effective teacher of what it means to endure hardship and heartbreak than previously traveling into the path of such difficulties. Perhaps in this realization we can find a basis for understanding even some of the most horrific events occurring in the human experience. As Helen Keller put it, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experiences of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. This is a difficult idea for a lot of people to accept. I know it was certainly a bitter pill for me to swallow. In discussing the possibility with a friend once, her reaction to the idea that we might actually choose some of the most awful things that happen to us with uncharacteristic anger. Clearly, this is not a popular prospect. But it is a prospect that might make a greater sense of the tragedy in life. By traveling through such awful events, we give ourselves occasion to calibrate our awareness of and sensitivity to a wide range of situations, including the very worst action of which human beings are possible. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the author of the book on Death and Dying, wrote, "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen." As difficult and unpalatable as the idea may be to consider, even the greatest tragedies, the most profane violence, the darkest nightmares we can inflict on one another may take place with our knowledge and consent, granted well before we were born, both for the perpetrator and the victim. Because in those unspeakably awful moments, everyone involved learns about suffering and pain. And in cases where innocent people, even children, suffer horribly and pointlessly, perhaps those lives were chosen by noble souls who came to participate and sacrifice themselves in order to facilitate lessons for others. Perhaps that's the answer to one of the most painful questions asked of religious believers, which is, how can God permit such horrors to take place? Perhaps they take place because we demand they do, because we need them to, because no matter which part we take in the midst of such darkness, these encounters may be the most profound teaching moments for empathy. And where is God to be found in such situations? No doubt very close by, suffering with everyone involved, hoping that the growth that can emerge will emerge and flower into deeper empathy. Providing the indispensable teaching by which we can master empathy is perhaps the most important function of what I call the flow of souls. As I've said previously, in the flow of souls we began as a prime incarnation created by the mind of God. We come into the world to live our first human lifetime, and when that life comes to its end, our consciousness returns to the domain of divine consciousness for contemplation and review. With the guidance of God, we choose a next life experience that is defined by what we have yet to learn or master. Having chosen the shape and circumstance of our next life, we begin a process by which all we have learned before becomes the subconscious mind of that next life, and upon which the conscious mind of that next life will be based. The vibrational energy of our consciousness begins to morph and match the energy selected for our next life. And as that transformation takes place, our consciousness starts to coalesce around the developing fetus that will be born at the time and place matching the vibration of the new incarnation. We return to the theater of experience and are born with a blank conscious mind waiting to be written by the life ahead of us. As this cycle repeats itself, each new lifetime, with all its memories, lessons learned, and emotions felt, are fully reintegrated into our authentic eternal being. That which previously was kept in our subconscious minds is unified with what was formerly our conscious selves. This synthesis then affects the nature of contemplation we undertake in considering further learning and incarnation. We can know what it means to be both the racist and the hated, both male and female, both gay and straight, both rich and poor, both powerful and oppressed, both loved and lonely, both kind and heartless, both generous and stingy. We can see in ways no single lifetime can illuminate all the possibilities of human existence, and with that sight, find the wisdom to become our best and finest selves. Next time on the Temporal Reverie, we will look at how reincarnation might consist of even more diverse opportunities for learning than we typically imagine. Is it possible that what we understand about the nature of reality through quantum mechanics points not only to the ability to compare differences in experience from one lifetime to the next, but also to apply the multiple ways even a single lifetime can unfold? With more than one lifetime of experience to study and consider, we are given the opportunity to process what we cannot truly do within the limits of any single lifetime. We can compare how differences in lives that were truly our own produce different feelings. We can know firsthand how the choices we make in life produce inescapable consequences for others, and in that knowledge expand our capacity for empathy. We can know at last what it means to be a soul in someone else's shoes. I'd like to know what you think about this episode. Please leave any questions or thoughts you'd like to share in the comments below. My thanks to God for this chance to share with all of you, and may the gifts of love, joy, peace, and enlightenment come to you all.